Good day, my name is Illana Meltzer. I'm the founder and lead consultant of 71.4 Consulting. In this video, we're going to look at why title deeds matter. We'll base this on our experience of running the Tenure Support Centre in Cape Town, South Africa. The TSC was originally set up as a walk-in facility where people can come in if they have problems with their title deeds. We don't only give clients advice, but we actively help them to resolve their title deed problems directly. What does a title deed actually do, and why does it matter? At a very basic level, it provides trusted evidence of property ownership. Of course, there are many possible forms of evidence, and a title deed is not the only mechanism that provides security of tenure for property owners. But the advantage of a formal title deed is that it can be widely trusted beyond the people in the family or the community who know one another. It is recorded in a deeds registry that is open for public inspection. This makes the claim to ownership recognizable not only to those who live in a particular neighborhood or community, but to external stakeholders as well. These stakeholders could be government entities as well as private sector players. It means you don't have to be an insider to participate in the property market, or to know whether someone who wants to sell your property is entitled to do so. As long as the seller has a title deed, buyers should feel safe to participate in the transaction, and lenders should feel confident to finance the transaction with the underlying property as security. Title deeds also matter from an administrative and a governance perspective. In most countries, it is through the title deed registered at the deeds office that the municipality knows who owns the property and with whom they should therefore engage when they deliver services, approve applications for development, and so on. The title deed confirms to the municipal administration who is responsible for the property and to whom they should send the bill for municipal services or grant permission to build an additional room. Title deeds also create bankability. If you have a job and you would like to buy a house, or you already own a house and want to use it as security or collateral, but there is no title deed for the property, you can't access mortgage finance. The title deed provides proof to the lender that the person who owes the money owns the property. In addition, the titling system allows lenders to register a lien against the property, preventing the owner of the property from selling it first without settling his or her debt. Because of this, a title deed turns a house from a shelter into a leverageable asset. But does the title deed really matter? Some have pointed out that there is very limited evidence that the poor are actually able to leverage their housing assets in the mortgage market. After all, no mortgage lender should issue a mortgage to a borrower who doesn't have income to afford the monthly installments. In addition, they note that poor people have their own social arrangements for managing tenure security, and the imposition of a formal titling system creates an unnecessary cost burden. This may be true, but the argument misses some critical points. Firstly, across the African continent, it is not only the poorest of the poor who own property, but who have no trusted title deeds. Many households who we might characterize as middle class might own property without formal title. These households have formally employed household members. They might have bank accounts or mobile money accounts. They might even have access to credit, but because the property they own or wish to purchase doesn't have a title deed, they cannot access mortgages. According to data collected by CAF, in Nigeria, a country with an estimated 43 million households, there are fewer than 35,000 mortgages. Likewise, in Kenya, where there are an estimated 12 million households, CAF reports that there are under 27,000 mortgages. While the lack of mortgage finance is not only a function of the lack of a robust and trusted titling system, without it, mortgage market growth is obviously going to be constrained. The lack of accessible formal title means that buyers have to save up to buy a house, a feat that few in the developed world could achieve. This isn't only a problem for the buyer, who we might characterize as middle class. It also means that the person selling the house, who may well be poor and not bankable, probably has to accept a lower price or provide informal finance to the buyer because there is no alternative. This is obviously problematic, particularly in the context of rapidly urbanizing African cities, where oscillating migration is a key feature. With regard to the costs of formal titling systems, these are high because in most countries, the tasks associated with validating identity and claims to property ownership are reserved for highly paid professionals. But increasingly, many of these tasks can be automated and performed with greater accuracy by machines, allowing the deployment of lower skilled, lower cost resources to interface with property market participants with no loss in integrity. These technologies significantly increase access and improve affordability to the point where the formal system can actually compete with informal alternatives in terms of cost and access. In South Africa, there are significant problems with title deeds, particularly in lower income neighborhoods. Across the market, we have approximately 6.6 million registered residential properties in the deeds office. About a third of those were built by the government and given to poor households for free as part of its housing subsidy program. Because the titling system and the supporting processes are inaccessible and expensive, many of these owners have not had their title deeds maintained. For example, if people have died, heirs have not reported the estate and the properties have not been formally transferred to heirs. Likewise, many people have sold their properties informally. In these circumstances, it is often the case that the sale has been endorsed by a local police station or street committee. But this keeps knowledge of the transaction to the individuals involved, because it has not touched the deeds office. The deeds registry and title deed has therefore not been updated, and the de facto or new owner and the legally registered owner are therefore not the same person. As you can imagine, this creates a lot of problems. For example, you could have a case where the registered title holder can present the title deed, indicating she has a legitimate right to the property, and sell the house again, even though she already sold the house informally. Because of this, housing disputes are common. These disputes can become very difficult to adjudicate and can be very destabilizing in low-income neighborhoods that are already vulnerable. In addition to these off-register transactions that aren't in the deeds office, in South Africa, we've got a title deed backlog of over 1.1 million title deeds that have never been issued on government subsidy properties in the first place. People have been living in these properties for years. Many of the original occupants have sold them and others have died, but there are no reliable records of these transactions. This generates an enormous challenge of trying to work out who actually owns the property and who should get the title deed, creating an administrative nightmare for government officials who need to transfer the properties. The title deed challenge we sit with is extensive. We have to formalize ownership on all those properties where title deeds were issued originally, but where title has not been maintained. We have to regularize all the backlog cases where title deeds have never been issued. And critically, we have to build a formal system that can compete with a far more accessible and affordable, albeit mostly inscrutable, informal system, so that property owners choose to maintain title over time. We have to create a formal system with the right balance. On the one hand, ensuring that evidence of a transaction is carefully scrutinized and that the identities of transacting parties are validated. But on the other, ensuring that the process is accessible and affordable. If not, people will continue to use informal mechanisms. As an illustration of the extent of the challenge in South Africa, I can take you through a case study of a neighborhood in Khayelitsha where the TSC started. At the time we set up the TSC in 2018, there were about 5,500 formally demarcated properties. Roughly a third of them are registered in the names of deceased property owners. We know this because we can compare the public records of ownership from the deeds registry against the population register maintained by the Department of Home Affairs. In addition, many informal transactions have taken place. While there is usually no record of informal transactions, In this area, the City of Cape Town conducted an occupancy survey in 2014 to gather this data, and that gives us some indication of what has happened. In this area, there are also many properties that were expropriated because the original owners were erroneously registered. The corrective transfers on these properties were never done, and so the ownership of these properties has not been formalized. Beyond this, there are several hundred subsidy properties where title deeds are yet to be issued. All in all, over 45% of those 5,500 properties in this Khayelitsha neighborhood have some kind of title deed problem that we know about. And this is in a relatively new neighborhood. We suspect that in older areas, the problem is going to be much worse. In conclusion, we have really got our work cut out for us in terms of sorting this out. Technology exists to help us do this, but the technology is not going to take us away from the problem of establishing who has what claim to which property. That hard work is time-consuming. We have to go through these matters case by case, establish who should own the property, and then bring them back into the formal system. The longer we wait, the harder it will get to establish the facts of ownership. But it is critical work in creating well-governed, functioning neighborhoods that can attract finance so that housing functions as an asset that enables wealth creation and economic inclusion.